Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Today marks our 100th podcast episode on the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. I'm Karen Robinson, and I'm delighted to share this extra special episode today with Judy Foreman, who is an amazing journalist. Please take the time to listen to this podcast and leave a review. I would like to dedicate this podcast episode to my mother, Linda Marie LaPointe Hansen, who passed away on January 6, 2023. My mother is a survivor of multiple traumas, including child sexual abuse. Thus, I would also like to dedicate this episode to other women who have survived sexual abuse and trauma. There's a few people that I would like to thank on my journey to making this podcast to its 100th episode. I would like to thank my family, Tony Robinson, and then my children, Grace, Lena, and Gideon, for their support. I would like to thank my original podcast editor, Miss Christina Lemony, and then my virtual assistant, Miss Genevieve, who has spent lots of time and hours editing this special episode for you today. Thank you, everyone, for all of your support. Please continue to listen. Hello, welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our guest is Judy Foreman. And her publicist sent me this wonderful bio. It's a little long, so bear with me. I want to read it because Judy is pretty talented and I want to showcase that. After a childhood of abuse, is it possible to work through internal trauma and heal? Boston Globe journalist and author Judy Foreman knows it is. After experiencing turbulent childhood trauma, Judy learned time, therapy, and helping yourself are keys to making healing possible. In her latest book, Let the More Loving One Be Me, we learn of the terror she felt every night as a girl as she lay in bed frozen, listening to her father's footsteps coming down the hall. Judy takes us through her journey covering 70 years of growth, deep fulfillment, rewarding work, and most wonderfully, love. Through the power of emotional courage, she changed her inner and outer experience of the world and discovered what matters most, cultivating healthy connections with other people. With a master's degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, experience as a Peace Corps volunteer in Brazil, a lecturer at Harvard Medical School, and recipient of over 50 journalism awards, Judy can bring her expertise on finding peace and healing after a turbulent childhood. So you can see why I wanted Judy here today. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you very much.
What an amazing bio.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's
That's a lot of
a little scary to be held up as the example of you can do it, but I have certainly tried and reaped a lot of rewards. So I ain't there yet, but well along the path. So
yes,
there's some modesty required here and truth. If you want, I could start by, my book is, I have little markers here, obviously. People wonder about the title, Let the More Loving One Be Me. And if you want, I could read you a short excerpt on about how this title came about. Would you like that?
I would love that.
Okay. So this starts. Here in the Swiss Alps, high above the little town of Zermatt, the snow was sparkling, the air crisp. It was cold at this altitude, 7,000 feet. But here, unlike in dreary Boston, the cold felt invigorating, cheery even. Hiking uphill, we had stripped down to just a few layers, no gloves, no hats, no neck gaiters. We had stuffed our outer jackets into our backpack pockets. Ken, my husband, a physician who had loved Switzerland ever since he went to medical school in Zurich 50 years ago, was behind me on the trail, hiking strongly like the athlete he was. He was 74 now, the age that Tom, my previous husband, had been when he died 9 years ago. After my husband Tom died, I opened a letter that he had read to me a year earlier. At that point, neither of us, of course, could have known how long he had, and he wanted to be sure to record his thoughts while he still could. In it, he told me how much he loved me and gave me his blessing to remarry if I had the chance. That blessing was the greatest gift I ever had, the most generous of presents, the love of one good man encouraging me to find another. Today in the Alps, as always, Ken was so very present, this living gift that Tom's generosity had allowed. So now, after lunch in the sunny restaurant watching the skiers, we reluctantly headed down the trail again. By now it was mid-afternoon, but the sun was still strong, the Matterhorn still rising majestically in front of us, Zermatt still far enough below us to give us plenty of time to get back before dark. We walked along in silence, accompanied only by the sound of our boots and poles squeaking in the snow, our two rhythms now one. Ken, he stopped on the trail to face me. A line from a poem just popped into my head. I think it's by W.H. Auden. What is it? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. We looked at each other, stunned by the wisdom of these few words, our eyes filled with tears. That's like a marital vow, he said, gathering me in his arms. It is, I answered. Let the more loving one be me. No, he said, burying his head in my neck. Let the more loving one be me. So I couldn't resist that. as the title for the book, partly because I think a lot of people who had abuse and trauma in childhood are afraid they'll never find real love, because that's what was missing initially. And I feel incredibly lucky and proud because it took a lot of therapy to kind of deal with my fears of intimacy and fears of getting close and be able to open up slowly. This took a long time. This was not one session or 1 year. It takes a long time. But yes, I mean, so my book is, here's a picture of it again. It's not just about the abuse. My father was also an alcoholic, and that affects many people. I have some of the statistics. And it's also emerging from that. And in my case, I was lucky enough to spend a summer in high school, my last summer in high school, as an American Field Service student living in Denmark for the summer with a Danish family. And it was kind of eye-opening because nobody got drunk. Nothing weird was going on. People laughed. They smiled. We had 5 meals a day. I gained 10 pounds. But it was weird. It was a chance to be in a happy family, or at least a functional family. But then we were pretty happy. And nobody was cross. Nobody was angry all the time, like my father was. And it's sort of, that was a glimmer that not everybody had the experience I had. Because I think one of the things that happens when you grow up with an alcoholic parent or in an abusive household, you don't think of it as abuse or alcoholism. It's just normal.
Right. It's what you know.
Yeah. That's all you know. And it's shocking to try to ingest the idea that that's not normal. That's not what most people have. You end up, as one thing I read said, when you grow up in an alcoholic family or an abusive family, you sort of have to guess at what normal is. You see all these Father's Day ads of kids saying, oh, I love my dad. And you think, really? People love their dad? Mm-hmm. Or my mother was always there for me. Well, not really. It's the advertising, the hallmark vision of things is so different from what many of us less lucky people grew up with. So I should let you ask some questions.
Yeah. So the less lucky thing, I want to take that for a second because I know it feels that way or worse when we're living through abuse. One of my podcast guests has said, and I've really gravitated to this, is that we end up being more enlightened spiritually. Would you agree with that?
I totally would.
So that part feels lucky.
Yeah, oh, that does. That's very true. In fact, I would broaden it to not just people who've been through abuse and sort of worked their way out of it, but people who've been to therapy at all compared to those who
Awareness,
have,
yeah.
or people who have looked inward as opposed to those who can't or won't. And it's a parallel universe, basically. People who get the difficulty of things. And sometimes that's like two good friends of mine, they're men and they didn't have abuse or alcoholism, but their fathers died really early. I mean, huge losses early on also can make you look inward. So anything that sort of penetrates that, thin surface, I think can have that effect.
Yeah, trauma has a really broad field anyway. So losing a parent young can be pretty traumatic too. Yeah.
I'm sure your listeners are aware of the Bessel van der Kolk book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's been on the bestseller list for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years straight. And his point, he's a psychiatrist in Boston, actually. And his point is, these experiences are engraved in our brain. I mean, at a neurological level and
our bodies. Yeah.
Brain and bodies. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a friend who was forced by her mother to do oral sex on her uncle when she was from the age of 4 on. And well into adulthood, she could not have dental work done except under general anesthesia. So much was the trauma. Her mouth kept that score. That's not unusual.
Right. It's very soul sucking.
Yeah.
The traumas. Yeah. So I usually just let my intuition guide the interview questions. So if I ask you something that doesn't sit right or you rather talk about something else, just let me know. It's all good.
Well,
So
I would like to read the memoir of my description of my father's abuse, if it's okay.
Yeah, let's just do a trigger warning. So anyone that isn't in the space today to hear this, pause this podcast and come back to it a different time. We don't want to expose your wounds or trigger you unless you're in the healing phase and would feel healed by Judy, claiming her truth and telling her story.
But
So
I don't have to do that if that's going to be upsetting to people. I don't have to do that.
Our stories are important, and if you're ready to share, I want to do that.
Okay. He never touched me. Still, it was decades before I could tell my mother about it, a feat I managed only when it was clear that she was dying. My mother seemed shocked at this belated telling, but how could she have been? Where did she think her husband was disappearing to, half naked, every night? I remember his penis, much as I would rather not. It terrified and disgusted me. He would come to my bedroom door, open it, and stand in the doorway, clad only in a t-shirt, his pot belly sagging and hairy, the hair sticking out from under the shirt hem. Above the neck of his t-shirt, his face erupted, oversized, 2 chins sinking down to touch the edge of his shirt, the dim light from the hallway bouncing off his hairless head, his thick, bushy eyebrows casting his eyes into shadow. His penis just hung there between his legs, pink, fleshy, an appendage, menacing, almost alive. This image, unerasable, set me up for a lifetime of insomnia, a fear of falling asleep. I couldn't afford to go to sleep. I didn't want to be surprised. Bad things were not supposed to happen in a house like this. This was Westchester County, an upper middle class neighborhood outside New York City. A chandelier bought on one of my parents' many European trips hung ostentatiously in the hallway, its delicate components having been assembled by workmen hired particularly for the job. Its job, the chandelier, not so much to shed light in the hallway, but to make clear to all who entered that this was a house of success, the house of a self-made man. This was a house of Waterford crystal and Evesham china, not the plastic tablecloths and mismatched plates and glasses of the house in Pennsylvania, the coal mining town where my father grew up, a house he was always ashamed of. The suburban house I grew up in had all the ornaments of a big corporate executive, expensive suits and silk ascots from Harrods hanging in his closet above the rows of soft leather shoes, an ever-smiling wife always at home with dinner waiting, And the two other props such an important man needed to complete the picture, my younger brother and me. We were ornaments, my brother and I, living proof of the corporate man's success. And so it went every night until I finally went to college. Every night I would hear his footsteps coming down the hall, getting closer and closer with each breath I took. Hastily, I would switch off my light, hoping I had been fast enough that no light would show under the door sill when he turned the corner toward my room. I would burrow down, squeezing my eyes shut, feigning sleep the way a small frightened animal plays dead. I got hot huddled under the blankets, yet my body was stiff, frozen in fear. In the beginning, I was too young to know the word rape. After all, I was only 12 when the nightly exposure started. But my brain knew deep down that this, whatever it was called, was wrong, horribly wrong. That fathers were not supposed to stand there in the semi-darkness, exposing themselves to their daughters. What if he came all the way into my room? What if he could tell I was awake? What if it didn't matter whether I was awake or not? What if he lay down on top of me, his heavy, awkward body squashing me? Would I be able to breathe? What if he took the covers off? What if... He always smelled terrible, reeking of stale man sweat. By this time of night, his breath would be sour too. At dinner, he would keep the full crystal decanter close by his wine glass, all the wine for him. He barely glanced at the rest of us, my mother at one end of the table facing him, smiling the way the women's magazine said to. My brother slouched miserably directly across the table from me. After the wine had worked its dark magic, he would start to cry. Nobody ever knew why. Nobody looked at him. Nobody knew what to do except wait for dinner to be over. I love this family so much, he would sob, his chest heaving, fat tears rolling down his cheeks. Families are everything. This is a happy family, he would say as my mother, nervous, looked on encouragingly. Everybody stared at their plates. Look at me, he would jerk up and snarl to my brother, who would slide down on his chair, his food untouched. Stop, my mother would protest. Stop. You stop. My brother would cry. In our father's eyes, my brother couldn't do anything right, especially sports. But that was partly because he couldn't see out of his left eye. And that was because he no longer had a left eye, because of my father. That's another story. There was so much I didn't understand then or for years afterward. A child only knows the world she is born into. Her parents are all there is, her only reality. That world is supposed to be a safe haven, but mine wasn't. At night, as always, my father would knock on my door. Are you awake? I would pretend not to hear. I just wanted to say good night. I would say nothing. Are you sure you're not awake? He would persist. I was just falling asleep, I would mumble, afraid not to respond at all. I just wanted to talk, he would say, then silently walk away. Nothing actually happened, so why did I feel raped? After all, he never touched me.
Wow. How long did it take you to read that story where it stopped being so intensely emotional?
Oh, I've written it and rewritten it so many times, but it's still I don't feel the fear anymore, but I feel the truth of the story. I mean, it's a powerful story because it was a powerful experience.
Yeah, so you're not numb to it then?
No, but it's so familiar at this point. I'm not upset to read it. I'm nervous about people's reactions and what it will make people think about me. There's still a shame element or a stigma element that I'm about to do a book talk on August, well, when the book comes out in a few weeks. And I know there are people, like you and I were talking earlier, who don't get it, who haven't had anything that has made them look inward themselves or be sympathetic to people who have had difficult childhoods. So I'm nervous about how these more naive, to put it nicely, people will react. And there is still stigma. There is still, I wasn't nervous about my other books coming out. This one, I feel much more nervous about.
Yeah, telling our truth has more consequences, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It really does.
I'm glad that despite the nervousness, that you're doing it anyway, because you're doing it for the woman who can't do it yet.
Yeah.
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 Because Because are you 70 this year?
I'm more than 70 this year.
Okay. I didn't ask how exact age. So, it took a minute to be ready to write your story and tell your story. And I just, want to put that out there that we can do this at any age, plus you've been working on your healing though for many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about your brother. Can you tell his story in a really short way? Like, did he end up being okay? No,
not really. He died a few years ago of cardiovascular things. But yes, when I was 6 and he was 3, my father gave us both pen knives, little pocket knives. Why he gave a 3-year-old a knife is a good question. He told us to always cut down, not cut up. And we had been on a family camping trip in Nova Scotia, and we were on the ferry coming back to the mainland. And my brother and I were in the back seat sitting on top of little suitcases. Then my brother got out his knife and was starting to cut up on a piece of string. And I said, "Oh, you're supposed to cut down." But he cut up and the knife flew into his left eye and stuck there. And I told my mother, and she turned around. She was in the front seat. She turned around. Oh, my God. So, my father got out of the car and tried to get the ferry boat captain to go faster, but they couldn't. Anyway, we finally got to land and went straight to the hospital, and they tried to fix up his eye and thought maybe he'd be able to see something, but maybe not color. I don't know why exactly. But then when we got back to New York, he was hospitalized again and they had to take his eye out. So he wore a glass eye from childhood on, and it always wept like mucus or something, like a cold or something. So the eye was always weeping, and I always thought it's not just the eye that's weeping, it's everything else.
So that's another trauma for you too, though, to have witnessed such a horrible accident.
Yes.
Yeah.
None of the other kids' brothers had glass eyes. None of the other kids had seen that.
That's. Ooh, yeah. I witnessed my brother. He was goofing off and walking backwards. I just wrote a poem about this, actually. It's going to come out in Substack in a few weeks whenever I decide to publish it. But I witnessed we were in the hayloft, and the opening to the hayloft is, the floor. It's a square that you have to climb up a ladder to get into the hayloft. We were working in hay with my father. My brother's goofing off. He starts walking backwards, and I try to scream, "Stop," but it was stuck in my throat, and he ended up falling down that hole, and I was like paralyzed in fear. My father turned around when he heard the crash down. So there was we call it a sawhorse. Sawhorse. It's like a table for construction. He fell on that. So it broke his fall. It wasn't as devastating as what you're sharing about the eye, but it was certainly scary as a child to witness that.
Yeah.
So that's what it came up for me.
But the interesting thing I think about my brother's experience was we never talked about it. It was not dealt with. My father made my mother and me walk around the house with a patch over one eye in an attempt to see what it would be like, or what it must be like for my brother to have only one eye. But we never talked about how it felt to have one eye, or how I felt, or my mother felt, or my father felt. It was completely denied, essentially, which is the bigger trauma, is when something like that happens and it's taboo to talk about.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And did your brother experience many hardships in life after that?
No, he became a clone of my father, kind of very financially successful, but I think emotionally he didn't go inside and try to sort things out as much as I did.
It seems like we take two paths, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for the loss of your brother.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with your mom?
Oh, oh, another piece. I
Oh,
I think a lot of what people who've experienced one dangerous parent also have is the lack of protection from the supposedly less dangerous parent. I mean, my mother, when I finally told her about my father coming to my room every night, she said she was dying. She said, "You should have told me," but I didn't even know it was abnormal. And if I had told her, I don't think she would have taken my side, because I think, her goal in life was to stay married and pacify my husband and try to keep the lid on things. But the result for me was total denial of my feelings and my experiences. So that took a long time, still takes a while
mhm.
to integrate all that kind of, because she wasn't there. He was there in a bad way, but she really wasn't there at all. And that's really hard for a kid, because where do you turn? And you don't even know what to turn with. It's normal, but it's destructive. It's not secure. It's a bad attachment.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's pretty common too, that especially for daughters sexually abused by fathers, where was the mom? Why didn't she step in? How could she not have known? Or in the case of my friend who I mentioned before, the mother set the whole thing up with the uncle. I mean, what, I don't want to go into a blame the mother, but there are mothers who are not doing their job for whatever reasons in their own life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always very hard to grapple with, right? Because there's even more of a stigma on mothers than fathers, right? That the stigma, or it could be truth, like how society describes mom. It's like our first, if your mother, if we're in her body and if she doesn't see to protect us, it's very confusing. Like you're
Yeah,
supposed to protect and nurture your young. And
right.
it's a society thing, it's a biology thing. So when that doesn't happen, it's very confusing, especially as a child, when you only have your subjective experience. You don't have that helicopter view of what
Exactly.
her life
Exactly.
entailed. Yeah.
And you often don't even have the words, if you're very young, to make any kind of sense out of it.
Yeah. And the bottom line is, despite whatever was going on with both of your parents, you didn't deserve that.
Yeah,
You
right,
deserved a safe, secure childhood where you could
right,
thrive. And so
right.
it's a miracle that you were able to thrive despite all that happened. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Took a lot of work. Is taking a lot of work. But yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
on the plus side, I've had a very wonderful, exciting, and gratifying career as a journalist. And the thing is, the whole goal of journalism is to tell the truth. To say if the emperor has no clothes, and I got paid for telling the truth instead of punished for even thinking the truth. So it's no accident that I ended up in journalism, or I don't think so.
This sounds very empowering. Yeah.
It is. It's great. I mean, speak truth to power is so true. And if you have a big institution like the Boston Globe behind you, that's power. That's definitely power. I mean, I wasn't writing about this for the Globe. I was covering medicine basically, but it's still you have clout as a journalist, which is great. It's really great.
So other than your career and the time you had in therapy, what else did you do along your healing path that felt super effective and making peace with your past?
Well, therapy was certainly a big part of it. Exercise has been huge. In fact, one of my books is called Exercise is Medicine. It's a nonfiction, sciencey, but accessible science. And I've been an exerciser all my life. And it really, I swim all the time. I'm on a swim team. And there's something about the rhythmicity of swimming or running or walking. It's kind of like a moving meditation, and the water feels good unless it's too cold. And when we exercise reasonably hard, people think it's endorphins that you get. It's actually a different chemical. It's actually the chemical like marijuana. It's called endocannabinoids. It's a marijuana-like substance. Your body makes this in response to exercise. That's why you feel good afterwards. It's not so much endorphins. It's really these marijuana-like molecules. Exercise also makes the brain secrete a chemical called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that acts on the hippocampus in the brain, and it improves cognition, and it also improves mood. That's another reason why exercise helps people feel better. So I would say that is another huge key.
Okay, so pause for a second, because I just learned something new. That's really powerful. For the first time in my life, I just turned 50 this year. For the first time in my life, I have exercise on my schedule consistently.
That's great.
So I blocked off 2 hours each day for it, and I have a trainer that does group exercises and does mobility stuff, and it's been wonderful. So I'm glad that you're talking about that. And also too, like I have a season of walking. Let me take a little sip of coffee here. And it was the first time that I walked consistently where I felt that rhythm.
Yeah.
And that's soothing.
Yes,
so I'm glad that you said that.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah. So tell me the name of the exercise book again.
1 second. It is called Exercise is Medicine. And
very good.
People can get it on Amazon. And it's, it has a lot of science base, but, it really gets at why exercise is so good for us. I mean, we all know it is, but we were not built to sit around in front of computers.
No, because I have this really horrible habit still of just working. And then when I go to stand up, it's like, ouch.
Yes.
The body says, what are you doing to me? Move.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a powerful book too that you're telling us about. Exercise is Medicine.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have your success in your career. That's empowering. We have years of therapy. We have exercise. What about routines? Exercise is a routine, but did you have, AM, PM routines that help you feel secure, or what's the other word I want? Consistent? No, I guess the word I want is stability. Like if we have really good bookends, we can feel really stable. What would you say about your bookends?
I think I have a routine. I don't have it as a goal or an explicit thing, but if you look at how I spend my days, they're pretty consistently the way I do things. I'm a late to sleeper and late to get up. I go to sleep around midnight and get up at 9. And I don't sort of do that on purpose. It's just kind of a habit, but it works. And my husband likes to have dinner more or less at 6 o'clock. So that's an anchor point. Lunch is no big deal. Lunch is in the car or at my desk or some power bars, basically. But I guess there is a routine. I don't set out to make a routine, but I know what you're saying. The rhythmicity of a day also is nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you exercise the same time every day, or you just?
Yeah, it ends up being pretty much the same around lunchtime, 11, 12, 1. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's by the power bar around the lunchtime.
The power bar. And I have to say, exercise has to be non-negotiable. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. It goes by the wayside.
It's the first thing that falls off usually. Yeah.
It is. It really, and it's once in a while, if I take my husband to the doctor, he has an illness, things get screwed up, but basically it has to be non-negotiable, or it doesn't happen.
Yeah. What about yoga or meditation? Most of my healers tend to do those.
Yes, I do those too. I used to do a lot more yoga than I do now because I do so much swimming, and meditation is great. I have, a lot of, I use Headspace, which you can get on your phone. And John Kabat-Zinn, people probably know, he has wonderful tapes. And there's a wonderful place in Cambridge, near where I live, Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Cambridge Insight Meditation Center has classes. I've taken a number of classes there. So yes, I think that should be non-negotiable. I find that falls by the wayside sometimes, but I try to do that every day also.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
getting centered.
Yes. My natural, I don't know if it's natural. My rhythm right now with that is like I get it in once every 3 days, and
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you tell your clients to do this daily, so perhaps
Right.
you should too.
Practice what you preach.
Practice what I preach. Oh man, if I practice everything I preach, I would
I
be
know
like
we'd
the
be.
stellar of help.
Very
Yeah,
true.
even getting out the water we need every day can be a challenge if you're not intentional.
Yeah.
Make it a priority. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Judy, what else do you want to share with us? You just have so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess one thing I have discovered is that the man I am with or married to, I'm in my third marriage. As I have grown through the years, the men I have picked have been different. My first marriage was fine when we met at 18 in college, and that was very immature and passionate and exciting, but neither of us had any idea what we were doing. I mean, I hadn't begun to deal with my family stuff. He was, athletic, a big athlete star, but had no clue about anything else. And, so we were both kind of bumbling around. And that did end in divorce after we got out of the Peace Corps. But then the more I grew, the more the men changed. My second husband died, so that was not a willful ending of the relationship. And he was right for me where I was at that stage. And then my current husband is very, very capable of going inside, and he's a psychiatrist actually. And so that has been just fabulous, just really good. So, I mean, I think I envy people who've been married for 60 or 70 years, because I've changed so much over that time period that who I would need wouldn't be the same for all those years.
Oh, I envy them when.
Well, that's a good question, but maybe they hit it right at the beginning, or maybe they're stuck in a very long, horrible marriage.
Maybe, yeah. The only way to know is to actually be in that relationship,
right?
Yeah, I've also been married 3 times. So I relate a lot to what you're saying. I didn't have anybody die though, but my third husband is how do I want to say this? I'm trying to be really kind to the exes, because they're good people.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Right.
But my husband, my current and last husband, I will say, he's extra phenomenal. He's very, very intelligent and self-aware. So
yes, self-aware is a good term.
Yeah.
But I think that's an important message, because from both of us, because I think when you've had a difficult childhood, it does impair your ability to choose a partner. And the fact that I've gotten better and better at it as I've gotten more healed, that's a very encouraging thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because I call it kissing a lot of frogs.
Yes.
Before. Yeah, because it doesn't mean those people, some of those relationships for other people, let's put it off us for a second so I can be objective and not worry what I say, because I have a child with the second husband, so I'm always mindful of, her relationship with her dad. So for women who make a wrong choice in a partner, a lot of times we fall into those toxic relationships because it's what is familiar, because of the toxicity of our childhood. So if a partner is emotionally abusive or just not very loving, it can be part of that cycle. So it does take time it's not only figuring out who's going to work best for you, but it's also believing that you deserve to be loved in a certain way and cared about in a certain way. So yeah, it does take time to get that right. So if you're listening and you're struggling with getting that right, that's kind of normal for being a survivor. It doesn't matter how smart you are either. A lot of smart women kiss a lot of frogs before they get the right person. Yeah.
That's true.
So other than your writing, Judy, do you have any courses? Are you thinking about coaching women? Like where is this book taking you in terms of how else or what else is on the agenda?
Well, nothing more at the moment in this kind of genre, but I've written one novel, one medical thriller, and I'm working on another. So I'm sort of doing the fun stuff.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, that's important because that's exploring the creativity part of healing. Because survivors also don't play a lot early in life. Our life is too serious. So I think this is part of healing too.
I'm also a serious singer. I've been in an audition-only singing group for my whole life, one group or another. So that's a lot of fun. And I teach a memoir writing course at the Harvard Institute for Learning and Retirement, which is one of those lifelong learning places. It's fabulous. And I take classes there too. I'm going to take a class on the composer Mahler starting in September, and then another course after that. The people in the group teach the courses. So that's great too. And I'm in 2 book groups. I'm pretty busy.
Yeah. Are you officially retired in any capacity from journalism, or are you still doing that too?
I hate that word.
Paused. Well, what word do you use?
Busy. No, I have recently written for the Boston Globe again and would again, not all the time because that would take up too much time, but sporadically. Yeah. So I don't see myself as retired.
Yeah. My husband says he's never retiring. And I don't think I will either, to a degree. Like, I think later stages in life, I'm just going to do more of what I want to do for work. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. I consider myself part-time self-employed.
Yeah. They say the longer you work, the longer you live.
I bet.
If it's work you love, I should say.
Right.
If you're in a coal mine, I'm not going to say you're going to live longer.
Right. In fact, the opposite. Yeah. Well,
okay.
You.
Well, any words of inspiration or encouragement for anyone listening today that's really kind of struggling? We could end on that.
Keep going. Keep going. It pays off.
You certainly have and continue to have a really full, beautiful life.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done a lot of travel too, and that's part of my healing journey. The travel.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you too. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Can you just let us know where people can learn more about you? You have a website?
I do. It's judyforeman.com. JUDYFOREMAN.com. Don't forget the E. JUDYFOREMAN.com.
And we'll end on that note. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.